Greetings, I'm Bill Kladky, and I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Neighborhood Beat. Today's show looks at housing in Maryland, foreclosure prevention, neighborhood revitalization, and the various things that the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development is doing to help our communities and our households. Our guest today is Mr. Reggie Stanfield, who is Director of Community Programs for the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development.
How you doing, Joe?
Hi. Reggie, may I call you that?
Oh, absolutely. Everybody does.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First of all, for our viewers who are unfamiliar, and it's been a long time since you've been on the show, could you tell us a little bit about the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development?
Well, the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development has been around since about 1987. It's a cabinet-level department, and it's involved in a lot of things having to do with building communities, helping businesses. We deal with federal programs. We deal with locals, nonprofits, and other partners to achieve our mission of revitalizing communities, building neighborhoods, and making housing stronger in Maryland.
Great, thank you. And I know that the department is a little bit of an anomaly because you really are more of a bank and a grantor.
Right.
Than a kind of a functional department in some ways.
Absolutely. We're sort of considered the state's housing finance agency, and as the state's housing finance agencies, we provide funding for a lot of projects, including multifamily housing, rental projects, and things like that, as well as some financing for mortgages for folks who buy single-family homes.
Yeah, and so folks' lives and their communities are touched in various ways by DHCD, as it's commonly known, and they're not even aware of it because you're usually funding other folks to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most folks don't realize a lot of the money that the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development makes available in communities across the state actually flows from the federal government, from a lot of the programs that the federal government makes available to us, and some money from the state. And as we know, funding in the state has gotten tighter, and that's become more of a challenge. But fortunately, we've had a long history of making the best use of federal funding, so we've been able to continue to make programs and services available with those resources as it gets tighter in the state.
Oh, thank you. And part of those funds go to the Greater Baltimore Community Housing Resource Board, which is producing this program. And,
oh, great.
And we thank DHCD for its annual grant to us to enable us to do things like this program. I know that you've been at DHCD a long time now, haven't you?
Yeah, since 2000. I started there working with the Maryland Mortgage Program, our mortgage product. That mortgage product at that time was very instrumental in helping a lot of folks become first-time home buyers, and in a market where houses were selling and folks were interested in becoming homeowners, it was sort of critical because it has a lot of parameters to sort of help folks get the education that they needed about home buying before we would actually issue a mortgage to them. So that product was critical at the time.
Yeah, and critical to understanding how we've gotten in this foreclosure crisis, because most programs out there, most folks who bought houses didn't get the kind of education and counseling and really training that through DHCD.
True.
They should have.
Yeah, and it was a requirement for the Maryland Mortgage Program. As the lenders came in with exotic and subprime mortgage products that didn't require counseling, people didn't actually understand what it was they were signing up for, what the ramifications, what does an adjustable rate mortgage mean to me when I'm buying my house. But in order to get a Maryland Mortgage Program loan, you had to go to some type of educational session, class, or group session training in order to get that type of information before you committed yourself to getting a mortgage.
Yeah, before, not after, when you probably might not show up. Right. But before, when you wanted to show up because you wanted to buy that house.
Right.
Yeah, well, those are the kind of programs that I know now will be the norm, rather than the kind of things that have led us into this problem.
You know, Bill, I think in this environment, a lot of people probably think that people aren't purchasing housing. But I think houses are still being bought, and the Maryland Mortgage Program is still being made available to folks who are interested in buying, and as long as they're willing to get the education that they need to participate. So it is still important that housing continue as part of the strength of our economy. But at the same time, we're dealing with the foreclosure crisis and dealing with the folks who were actually impacted by a lot of the tactics and the decisions that were made as a result of lack of regulation and lack of oversight and lending just being too loose.
Right. I know the department gives a lot of assistance to folks to help prevent foreclosures. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, well, you know, in the spring of '07, Governor O'Malley announced the HOPE program, Homeowners Preserving Equity. And with that announcement, the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, along with the Department of Labor, Licensing and Regulation, embarked on a partnership to attack the issues that were impacting folks as a result of this foreclosure crisis. The Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development sort of took the lead in developing a multi-pronged approach. That approach included outreach to many of the homeowners who were potentially victims of foreclosure, because what we found at the time was a lot of folks who were going to be in trouble or were already in trouble didn't know where to call for help or were reticent about calling for help. So, you know, it was important that the word get out to them,
right.
Call, and they'll know who to call and where to call. So what we did was we embarked on an outreach campaign and eventually developed what we call our mortgage late don't wait campaign, where we told folks, if your mortgage is late, don't wait to call for help, because it's very important that if you're having problems paying your mortgage, that you don't let it get so far along that when you do finally need help, it becomes more difficult to give you that help. So as part of that outreach, we really did emphasize mortgage late don't wait. We put ads on buses, we put ads on billboards, we did radio, we did print media. We mailed out over 600,000 mailers to folks in communities that we had identified as particularly having a problem with mortgage foreclosures, when we looked at things like notices of filing of intent to foreclose, and targeted the communities that we saw that seemed to be particularly impacted. We put up a hotline, the Maryland Hope hotline, so that folks could call and ask for help. That number, 1-877-462-7555, and that's an important number for anybody out there that's having problems.
Could you please repeat that?
1-877-462-7555. The Maryland Hope hotline. We put that hotline out, and to date, we've probably gotten more than 22,000 calls just on that hotline. Wow. So that multi-pronged attack on the issue, we did outreach. We put out some products to help people. We put out a refinancing product called Lifeline. The Lifeline product allowed folks who thought they were going to get in trouble with their mortgage but still had their credit intact and anticipated they may need to refinance out of an adjustable rate mortgage or some other type of exotic mortgage, could call and request refinancing under the Lifeline product.
And those programs are still going?
They're still going.
Still going. So folks, so the message is, if your mortgage is late or if it's almost going to be late, if you're having trouble, call
for help.
Or they could go on the website
www.mdhousing.org.